What's going on, y'all? Tower number 9 here, and we are going to begin our tournament coverage of the TTI League Season 0 Top Cut, which will be played tomorrow. I'm hoping to record or stream some of the games from that tournament, but right now I'm going to be looking at the Top Cut lists, which were just shown to give you a little bit of a preview of what's going on. So we have the number one seeded player, Thork. Thork is running a Vader Green build. And this is an interesting build. This is a this is a fairly solid, I think, Vader ramp deck. You got your three super laser technicians, your three resupplies. This is the type of deck that I think is going to try and excel in the late game. He has Devastator in the sideboard here as kind of an ultimate late game card against other sort of control-y decks. Fair number of attachments here with Traitorous, the Fallen Lightsaber, and Vader's Lightsaber as well. He is also using Force Throw and Fifth Brother, so that should be interesting to see as well. Overall, I think this is I think this is a kind of a scary list. I believe Thork is the only Vader player in this tournament, but he won the previous tournament. It wasn't a league event, it was a separate tournament, but he won that playing Vader at that time as well, doing very well against a bunch of Boba Greens. And, we're going to see if he can repeat his success. He's number one seed going into it. His first matchup is going to be with Destiny Riku, who is playing a an aggression Leia build. Looking at this deck list, this is an aggro deck. He doesn't really have any big late game stuff. In fact, the most expensive unit in his deck is uh, going to be K2 or Bright Hope. Um, he does not. He has three Traitorous in sideboard, so there is the chance of Traitorous being played there, but it's not a main deck card. And then, interestingly, he actually has two copies of Power Failure as upgrade control. I'm a little surprised by that because I think disabling Fangfighter is a stronger option, but we'll have to see. I will say, even though Thork is the number one seed and Destiny Riku is the number 16 seed, I actually think this matchup probably favors Destiny Riku. Thork does have some anti-aggro stuff, but it's in sideboard. Destiny Riku has a very aggro build, and I think at least in the first game, and maybe even after sideboarding, the Leia aggression game plan might have the advantage against Vader. So we'll have to see how this does. Thork is certainly a very strong player in the number one seed, but I do think this matchup might favor Destiny. We'll have to see how it goes. All right, so then we have myself, Tower number 9, playing a red Luke test deck. This is not incredibly refined. Honestly, I've been focused more on doing like varied gameplay for the channel with with different leaders, different sorts of things going on. So it's been not a lot of like super intense refining. However, I like Red Luke post Force Throw. Carabast's also a nice card. Trying a copy of the Forces with Me, which was newly previewed. We're gonna have to see how this goes. I'm hoping this has some good tools to deal with aggro with a fair amount of removal and restore, and also has a bit of late game as well with things like Luke, the potential to sideboard in cards like Vanquish and the Redemption Medical Frigate, have the disabling Fang Fighter in sideboard for upgrade control. Overall, we'll have to see how it goes. But I'm going to be leading off in a game against a 30 HP aggro Sabine. So I think it's very fair to say that I am going to be the control, and this Sabine aggression deck is going to be the beatdown. So the question is, am I going to be able to stave off the aggression here and stabilize the game? Honestly, I don't know. Um, Looking at this, this looks like an interesting thing about this deck is that it is a red Sabine, so it has aggression. It has a lot of I don't think this is a for a cause deck because there's a lot of just single aspect red things, but he has the various readying cards. So we have, for instance, the Keep Fighting here. He's actually playing the Rallying Cry to give a bunch of units raid, which can be really scary if you then ready them with Keep Fighting or Aggression. So this is a very aggro deck. I'm happy to see he's on the 30 HP base. but there's also a huge amount of upgrade control in this deck, and my deck has a fair amount of upgrades, both in terms of Luke shields and in terms of actual upgrade cards. So I'm honestly a bit worried, you know. I don't know how this game's gonna pan out. I might get knocked out, I might get knocked out right there in the first round. Hopefully not, but you know, we'll have to see. Next matchup we have J-Rod. So J-Rod is playing, this looks like a pretty standard, you know, this is, I think, a pretty standard Boba Green. Um, Not a ton to say about it, I think. He's playing the new Rook card, is playing Jabba the Hutt, which I know some players haven't been as positive on. Um, only, only nine starting plays here, which is, you know, a little low in my view, but I could be wrong. But you know, got the another interesting thing is there's no resupply in sideboard. I think a lot of these decks have resupply in sideboard, but it looks like J-Rod's only playing the Super Laser Technician. So this is, I think, a bit of a different take on Command Boba from what I might play. But honestly, it seems to me to be a solid build. You know, Command Boba is really solid. Boba Fett is just so efficient, and you know, we'll see how J-Rod does. It looks like he would play against Faith, but Faith dropped before the cut. Not sure if there's going to be an alternate or if that's just a buy for J-Rod, but Faith was playing a blue-green Krennic deck. This looks like a control deck. So we see a lot of removal. We have Power of the Dark Side and Takedown and Overwhelming Barrage and Count Dooku and Avenger. So this is a long game control deck with it has ramp, it has a bunch of removal, it has even more removal in sideboard, it has sentinels in sideboard. And I think this game plan is to try to control the early game and then win the end game with your powerful capital ships like Avenger and Devastator. However, it looks like Faith did drop before the top 16, so I think that we will not get to see this deck in action. Hippo here, though, has a very similar deck. Also playing green Krennic, and honestly, with a lot of the same cards. It's not exactly the same, though. So, for instance, if we look at the two drops, Faith is playing Admiral Piet, and Hippo is playing the Viper Probe Droid there, and the no regional governor, but instead the seasoned shore trooper. I think Faith is gonna Faith's deck has an easier job activating the Sentinel ability on that Emperor's Royal Guard compared to Hippo's build. Um, Hippo also only playing two copies of Resupply and trying the new Baze Malbus two vanquishes here is playing Rook. Yeah, interesting stuff. So this is another deck, kind of a similar style of thing. Once again, a defensive control deck trying to get to these capital ships in the late game. Faith has a little bit more late game with Count Dooku and with a second copy of Devastator compared to Hippo, but Hippo has some more stuff in the mid game here, I believe. So interesting scenario there. Then we have Kotal. So Kotal is playing a red Luke build. It looks very similar to my red Luke build. In fact, it looks extremely similar to my Red Luke build. Um, I think there are a few differences, so I'm not playing Obi-Wan. Basically, my version of the build is more focused on like the mid-range units, and kind of some smaller stuff compared to this. So he's only on 9, two drops. I have 12. I have he's not playing Fleet Lieutenant or Wing Leader, which I consider to be good mid-range plays in favor of more top-end plays with Obi-Wan, Mace Windu, and Redemption Medical Frigate in main deck. He is also on the 30 HP base, which is interesting. I think the 25 is better, but we have seen a few aggro decks here, and maybe that, I don't know. I personally like 25 HP if I'm playing red. I feel like Tarkentown's really good, but who knows? You know, maybe Sabine's gonna tear my face off. Okay, so next we're gonna go to Home. So Poems Green Tarkin here. This is a yeah, this is a double green Tarkin build. So it has a lot of ramp. It's a 9 ramp Tarkin, so we have the three super laser techs, the three resupplies, and the three commands. I personally don't love this style of deck because ramp beyond the first one feels unimpactful when your leader deploys at 5. But there are some strong points to recommend it for sure. So he has six starting units with official that can then go into Emperor's Royal Guard and then potentially get buffed by Tarkin. That could be a big obstacle for the opponent. Academy training also allowing some substantial obstacles there. Has Strike True has added more removal options to this type of build than it used to have. We have the Overwhelming Barrage, of course, and some solid chunky units at the top end as well. A little surprised that he's not running the Skiff, which I think should be good in this composition, but maybe because it's not Imperial and he wants to do Imperial synergy things with Tarkin and with stuff like the max firepower in the sideboard and the tie advanced, maybe that's why he is running Alice, who has a similar role, costs one more, has some card draw, and is Imperial. Okay, so then Picardy third, I believe playing against home here, is a double yellow Boba. So we're gonna have a war of two monocolor decks, and this is kind of what you would expect from double yellow Boba. He is running Jabba. He's running Jabba. Oh, okay. So he has two Asteroid Sanctuaries also. So he is running Jabba with 6 cards to potentially pull with it. Um, yeah, this is double yellow Wobo build. We got Jeddah City, which I think is good for that type of thing. I like the 30 HP base uh, for some aggro decks that want to just race, but I think for double yellow Boba, Jeddah City is the play. And the main reason to play double yellow is the very strong double yellow cards. So we have 3 copies of Bodhi Rook, of Cunning, and of the Cantina Bouncer, which I think is very reasonable. Next up, we have Dudeness. So his Dudeness playing the Han Tarkentown. That's a red Han. Looks like it's gonna do it's gonna do Han stuff. Um, Not playing Ezra, which can be a annoying start 3 cost unit to play on the first turn, but could use red 3 or of course the Falcon in that role. And it looks like he's pretty optimized. It looks like this is a pretty aggressive deck. He even has a Wolf in main deck. And it looks like he's also pretty optimized for a cause I believe in. In fact, he doesn't the oh, yeah, so this is actually a pattern that we've seen in some of the more aggro like Sabine or Leia decks, where the only non-heroic card you run is Surprise Strike, which is really good. Everything else is heroic, so he should be consistently hitting 3 or 4 damage on those for a cause I believe in, which is a great way to try and close out the game. So this is a very aggressive list. He also has Mace Windu in here. Yeah, definitely some potential nasty moves to inflict here. The heroic sacrifices as well as the surprise strikes for burst damage. No fleet lieutenant, but we'll see how we go. And he does have some sideboard options. So he has, for instance, outmaneuver the Fang Fighter, the what are those guys called? Syndicate lackeys. So interesting scenario here. This build is very aggro, but if he brings in some of this stuff, he could kind of change it up. So we could see like 3 Syndicate lackeys, bring in the Change of Hearts, the Disabling Fang Fighters, and then you could remove for a cause now that you've diluted your heroic density. Could be very interesting. So I'll be interested to see how this goes. He's also playing not only the Millennium Falcon, but also the Tech Liberator gunship, which have similar roles in being very good at taking out small ships and then leaving you with a unit afterwards, though the Falcon is probably a better unit and more aggressive. But it's interesting that Dudeness is running both of those. I'm wondering if he's going to be really trying to push in the space arena based on that, and maybe that also explains the outmaneuver there as a potential counter to slow someone down if they're in the ground arena. Then we have Poison Ivy here, another double cunning Boba build. Interestingly, a copy of Chimera in the sideboard. I don't love Chimera, but And like the other double yellow Boba, running all 9 of the double aspect cunning cards. But one interesting difference is that I believe that, yeah, this deck is not running Boba, or is not running Jabba the Hutt. It has it in sideboard, but not in main deck. And actually, Surprise Strike is also in sideboard, which is interesting. I personally really like Surprise Strike as a main deck card, but I could be wrong. This has like a really low cost curve. So he has 3, 4, 5, 8, 11, uh, 14. He has 17 one or two drops, plus the two Snow Trooper lieutenants. So this is a very low to the ground aggressive version of double yellow Boba. I'm wondering if this is going to play. It's interesting though that like if he was going to play this as just like a really aggro racing like tempo disruption and try to just do damage to the base type deck, I would expect to see the surprise strikes in main deck. But anyway, it's a double yellow Boba deck, very low to the ground and has some nasty moves there for dealing with enemy units as well. Should be pretty interesting. Wu has gone with Luke Green. um, Luke Green versus Luke Red is kind of a dispute or whatever among Luke players. I personally prefer Luke Red at this time, but Wu has gone with Luke Green, and yeah, I don't think Luke Green is bad. I think it has some very cool options. So we're seeing the Alliance Dispatcher, which has been a big upgrade for Luke Green in particular. I think that works much better for Luke than for basically any other deck. And then we have a bunch of other units here. The classic Restored Arc and Battlefield Marine, the Echo Base Defender, really solid. Got some nice removal. He has Vanquish in main deck, which might be that might be kind of a tech choice to help against Boba. I think Vanquish is one of the best counters to Fett's Fire Spray that we have right now. Arguably Entrenched is a better counter, but with the upgrade removal that we're seeing in the game right now, I'm not sure that's reliable. So interesting build here, and I think he's actually going to be playing against another green Luke, Rebel Trader here. Looking at these two decks, Rebel Trader has a spicy out of aspect force throw. Um, Overall, these two decks have a lot of similar components, but there are some relevant differences. So Rebel Trader's version of the deck has the Vanquishes in sideboard instead of main deck. They're both playing a similar high end, but Rebel Trader actually also has two spicy out of aspect overwhelming barrages, has two Vigilant Honor Guards as kind of some extra sentinel in the ground arena, I guess, and is playing that Escort Skiff, which I think is a really good card. Interestingly, Wu's not playing it, so maybe Wu's testing wasn't as positive. One thing that surprises me is that neither of these players is playing Wing Leader, which I consider a really good card, but we'll have to see how that goes. I do see some Traitoresses in the sideboard here, also for Rebel Trader. That's probably going to be a good card to side in a matchup against another Luke, but we'll have to see how it goes. And then we have Astro Tech here. This is going to be a green Boba build. Looks like a kind of classic green Boba composition. Got some nice early game units with Greedo, the Cartel Spacer, the Crafty Smuggler, and the Viper Probe Droid. Then we have some three costs with he is running both of these ramp cards, and he is running these in the main deck, which is interesting. Boba Fett, the Seventh Fleet Defender, these guys are just really solid mainstay units. He is running the Steadfast Battalion, which I think is kind of a counter card to an opposing Boba, and has some anti-aggro tech in the sideboard as well with cards like Cell Block Guard and the Consortium Star Viper. And I believe his opponent will be Droson here, who is playing Obsidian Mr. Spock, which is a Krennic green deck. And looking at it, it is, I think it's similar to some of the other green Krennic's builds that we've seen. He's not playing Devastator, but has three copies of Avenger. And I think this is basically a like ramp or control style of deck where you're really trying to get to the late game and cause problems for your opponents there. We see, interestingly, both the Cell Block Guard and the Emperor's Royal Guard to provide some Sentinel options on the ground. Um, a fair number of 2-cost units to fight early on, playing the Power of the Dark Side and take down here 3 copies of Rook. Should be pretty interesting to see how this goes. And then those are all the decks for the tournaments. Then there's kind of a meta breakdown here. So we have four. There are 4 Bobas, 2 green, 2 mono yellow. There are 4 Lukes, 2 red and 2 green. There are 3 green Krennics, 1 red Leia, 1 green Vader, 1 green Tarkin, 1 mono red Sabine, and 1 Han. And 9 villains, 7 heroes, which is fairly balanced. Green seems to be quite popular. 10 of the decks have green, whereas the next highest color is blue with 7. And Energy Conversion Lab is, of course, the most popular base. Well, it is probably the best base in the game. In fact, more than half the decks are playing Energy Conversion Lab. So yeah, this should be an interesting tournament, and I think that one thing that these decks really show is that there's been a shift in the meta. At the time that this first or season 0, as they called it, at the time that season 0 ended, the the meta was very aggro, with Leia and Sabine being kind of the top decks at that time, doing really well. And since then, there's been kind of a shift to a more mid-range meta, which I think was basically to counter that aggro threat. And indeed, we're seeing, Boba and Luke are both mid-range decks. Green Krennic is kind of a control or like ramp deck, but has a bunch of removal and healing and stuff to try to fight against aggro. And we only actually have 2 of the like classic aggro decks with Leia and Sabine, though I think Dudeness's Han is basically also in an aggro composition. So if we say like 3 aggro decks, maybe 8 mid ranges. The Tarkin deck is. Let's look back at that Tarkin deck, but I think the Tarkin deck, yeah, it's kind of it's a ramp. It's like a ramp late game deck. So, we have the one Vader from Thor, which is kind of classic ramp, big stuff. The Krennic decks are kind of similar. The Tarkin deck is kind of similar. But the Krennic decks have more like anti-aggro tech into them. The Vader is kind of a good, I think could be a good choice for countering the mid-range builds, that we'll have to see. And then we do have a few aggro competitors also to spice things up. But mid-range seems to be the most common um, in this, which is kind of an interesting show of how the meta shifted, plus kind of some of those later game decks, which are maybe targeting the mid-range decks. And then, we'll see if they have shifted too hard to end up getting taken down by the aggro players. Okay, so that's going to do it for this one, guys. The tournament will occur tomorrow. I intend to record and or stream my own games if possible, and if knocked out, we'll hopefully start streaming some of the other games in the event. I'm looking forward to seeing the Take the Initiative Online League Season 0 Top Cut tournament. Should be a lot of fun, and yeah. That's going to do it for this one, guys. Hope you enjoyed this little preview. If you have any predictions as to who will win the tournament, feel free to leave them in the comments below, or if you have thoughts on any of the particular deck lists shown, I'd be interested to hear predictions, especially if you get them in today before the tournament occurs. Thanks to you all for watching, and we'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I will catch you guys later.